Segment 5 is application submission information. First question is, where are the instructions for my NIH grant application? The first answer is the SF424 application guide. This is the overall general instruction set that NIH uses. You can find it by going through your notice of funding opportunity where it'll be linked, or you can go directly to grants.nih.gov and find it there. Now, keep in mind, there are several different subsets of forms that make up the SF424. The F series are for fellowships. The T series are for training grants. For BRE-SPAD, you want to follow the R series. The R are the research grants, and BRE-SPAD uses the R series instructions. Another important point to keep in mind is that because the SF424 is general, specific instructions are included elsewhere, and I will talk about that momentarily. I also want to highlight that we have another video in this series that goes through more details of highlights that a BRE-SPAD application should contain. So this is a very broad overview, not getting into many details, but please check out that other video if you're interested in applying. The second place to look for your instructions is the notice of funding opportunity. Remember, the SF424 is broad. The notice of funding opportunity is specific to the program, in this case, BRE-SPAD. There will be times, and including for BRE-SPAD, where the NOFO is different than the SF424. If that's the case, follow the NOFO. The NOFO may have additional instructions, different instructions, or more specific instructions. The NOFO could negate the SF424. In that case, you follow the NOFO, which I've just showed you in the prior segment. The third place to look for instructions are notices, in particular those that could be published after the NOFO has been published. Some notices are published before the NOFO, and they are already cited on the NOFO. Some notices are published after. Similar to what we just said, if the notice is different than the NOFO, you follow the notice. Some notices, however, may not differ from the NOFO. They just might provide additional information, maybe something that is now clarified or elaborated on in a notice, but it is possible that the notice adds to or subtracts from something in the NOFO. So because of that, and because some notices are published after the NOFO's release, it's important to realize that you are responsible to keep up with what these changes could be. One way you can do this is periodically look at the NOFO online, live on the website, or what I suggest for anyone is to sign up for the NIH guide so you can just learn about any new relevant notices or funding opportunities that may be published. So if you subscribe to the NIH guide, you'll get an email once a week, and it just lists all the newly published funding opportunities in that week. It lists notices that were published in that week, policies from NIH, and other information like that. So I suggest signing up. This is one easier way to keep track of any notices that might apply to your programs of interest. And you might have seen this when I showed the NOFO in the prior segment, but you can find that section at the top called Related Notices. So you can see here for BRE-SPAD, there's some notices that are related that were published before the NOFO was published. So these are listed here, but there could be additional ones in the future. Here's a resource for you. On the BRE-SPAD webpage, we have a list of application components and links. I'm showing you just an image. You might not be able to read this, but it is on our website under the section called Things to Do Before Applying. Under that section, there is a link that says Review Required and Suggested Application Page Links for Key Application Components. So that's what this chart is. It's a list of the documents you will need in your BRE-SPAD application, in addition to the forms that you're going to fill out where you're going to write the information into the form. This list is showing you documents more so that you'll need on top of the forms. And this is coming mostly from the SF424, and then some specifics are coming from your NOFO. The other thing that this shows you is whether that application component has a specific maximum page length. Some do and some don't. Or it may be a suggested page length, in particular for the research plan, which again, we describe more in a subsequent video. This also shows you whether this component is required for all applicants or whether it's optional. I want to talk a little bit about application withdrawal and submission errors. This is very important. Your application has to meet all the requirements of the SF424, the NOFO, and any related notices, which is what I've been saying now for a little bit. But if this doesn't happen, your application can be withdrawn by NIH, which means it will not be reviewed and has a 0 chance of being funded. Now, when you submit your application, grants.gov and our electronic research administration system, ERA, will do some validations. It will check, and you may see some errors saying you don't have this and you might need that, things like that. However, this is not all the possible errors or possible requirements that you have. It's just some of them. But if you do get any of these submission errors, the best thing you can do is submit early enough so that if you do get a submission error, you have time to address it, fix it, and resubmit before the application is due. So let's say that happens. Now you've successfully submitted your application. However, then actual human beings at NIH will perform checks on your application before it gets sent to be reviewed. What they are looking for are elements that the automated system cannot detect. What that means is, even if you submitted your application successfully and you didn't have any submission errors, there still could be errors that the human being will catch, and your application can still be withdrawn without review. So this further reiterates the point: submit early enough so you have time to address errors and hopefully are able to resubmit a fully compliant application before the deadline. Here are just some examples of these reasons applications are withdrawn. One example is not following any of the formatting rules for your attachments. For instance, an unallowed file name, an unallowed font, not properly citing, you have too many pages for that document, etc. These are just a few. The guidelines are online. Of course, if you're not eligible as an applicant, then you'll be withdrawn and you can't be funded. As you've seen in other segments of this video, BRE-SPAD has a very specific eligibility. We describe this, we give you assistance figuring this out, but please make sure you're eligible. Confirm this with your institution before submitting an application. Another example is if you submit a resubmission or renewal when the NOFO doesn't allow that application type, which is also the case for BRE-SPAD. As I mentioned before, you can only submit a new application for BRE-SPAD. If you're not funded, you can submit a new application again. Another example that happens is if you're missing a required application item. Keep in mind, this could be something from the SF424, or it could be something that's only mentioned in the NOFO. Just one example is that all BRE-SPAD applications must have an organizational eligibility and commitment letter. This relates back to why we have that table online on our website that you can take a look at the application components, which helps you understand the NOFO and the SF424. That concludes this segment.